Jimin stuns the crowd by disowning Jungkook in front of Army. What led to this explosive confrontation, and what secrets have been buried for years? You're nothing to me anymore. Jimin's voice, sharp and cold, pierced through the room like the shattering of glass. The mic in his hand trembled slightly, though his face remained expressionless, his eyes, dark and unreadable, fixed straight on Jungkook's. The roar of Army in the packed fan meeting venue instantly dropped into dead silence, as if the entire universe was holding its breath. Jungkook didn't blink. He just stood there frozen. The playful smile that had curled on his lips seconds before was gone, like it had been ripped off his face. His chest rose and fell faster than usual, but he didn't move. Not even a flinch. Cameras stopped flashing. Light sticks stopped waving. A few gasps erupted from the front row. Staff members exchanged panicked glances. The moderator awkwardly cleared his throat, unsure if this was part of a skit, some rehearsed moment fans weren't aware of. But Jimin wasn't acting. He turned his head slowly, eyes still locked with Jungkook's, and let out a low breath, as though releasing something that had been choking him for months, maybe years. I should have said it a long time ago, he continued, voice lower now, the sharpness replaced by something heavier, something broken. But I waited. I gave you chances. I let you walk all over everything we had. Not anymore. Someone dropped a phone in the audience. The thud echoed unnaturally loud. Jungkook finally blinked, his jaw twitching. Jimin, he said, just barely audible, the mic picking up the tremor in his voice. But Jimin shook his head, lips pressed tight. The tension was suffocating. His heart was pounding in his ears, but he wouldn't let himself falter, not this time. 10 minutes ago, the event had been filled with laughter. Fans had been cheering as the boys took turns answering questions pulled from a glass bowl. It was Jimin's turn, and the question was simple, even harmless on the surface. If you were stuck on a deserted island, the fan's note read, which member would you bring with you? Everyone had laughed. Jungkook teased, "Don't say me again, Young," grinning wide like nothing had changed. And maybe that's what pushed Jimin over the edge. He had smiled at first, a hollow, polite smile, and then his answer changed everything. None of them, he said without missing a beat, especially not Jungkook. Everyone thought it was a joke until they saw his face. The dressing room backstage was chaos. Staff avoided eye contact. Security kept the press away from the venue's back entrance. Rumors were already spreading online. Clips were being posted. The hashtag Jungkook fan meeting was climbing rapidly attached to raw, blurry videos of a moment no one could explain. Jungkook stood by the mirror, shoulders hunched, palms braced against the counter. His reflection stared back at him, pale, hollow-eyed, and confused. The grease paint hadn't been wiped off yet. His skin still held the faint sparkle of stage powder, but he looked nothing like the golden maknae he was known to be. Jimin was in the hallway, alone. He leaned against the cold cement wall, his breathing slow and deliberate. In his pocket, his fingers clutched a crumpled photo worn at the edges from too many times folded and unfolded. It was from 3 years ago, Busan. A moment caught in sunset light, a private memory until now. He could hear Taehyung's voice faintly from another room, trying to calm the rest of the members. Namjoon had left his seat in the green room minutes ago, presumably looking for Jimin or Jungkook. Hoseok paced like a caged lion. Seokjin stared at his phone, reading tweets faster than he could process them. But Jimin remained where he was, as if glued to the silence of that hallway. His lips parted slightly. He wanted to cry, but he had cried enough. What happened? Namjoon's voice was low but firm as he finally found Jimin in the hallway. Jimin didn't answer immediately. He exhaled slowly, staring at the cracks on the cement wall in front of him, as if the truth might crawl out from the crevices. He crossed the line, Jimin finally said. Too many times. I thought I could forgive it, bury it. But today, in front of all those people, when he looked at me like I was still supposed to pretend everything was fine, his voice cracked. Just once. But he forced it back down. Namjoon studied him. His leader instincts kicked in, try to patch it, try to contain it, but this wasn't a publicity crisis. This wasn't just a scandal to be managed. This was deeper, older. Are you sure you want this out in the open? Namjoon asked carefully. Once it's out, there's no going back. Jimin's laugh was bitter. It's already out. The ride back to the dorm was silent. The van was split, Jungkook alone in the back row, staring at his hands. Jimin by the window, earbuds in but no music playing. The city lights flickered past, indifferent to the fire burning between two souls that once moved as one. Behind his closed eyes, Jimin remembered everything, the nights they'd stayed up until dawn, whispering dreams, the bruises from dance practice, and how Jungkook used to ice his ankle without asking. The letters, the promises, the look in Jungkook's eyes that said, "I'd never hurt you." Lies, because that look came back, again and again, after every silence, every betrayal, every moment Jimin waited for an apology that never came. Later that night, Jungkook stood outside Jimin's door, knuckles hovering just inches from the wood. He didn't knock. He couldn't. Inside, Jimin lay awake, staring at the ceiling, heart aching in a way no scream could soothe. It had begun, something irreversible, something brutal and needed. And for the first time in years, Jimin didn't feel like he was protecting a brother. He felt like he was protecting himself. The knock never came. Jungkook stood outside Jimin's door for what felt like an hour, his hands suspended in midair, trembling slightly, not from fear of confrontation, but from something far more hollow, far more dangerous. Regret. Inside the room, Jimin knew he was there. His body didn't move. His eyes remained fixed on the ceiling, but he could feel Jungkook's presence like a heartbeat outside the door, uneven, hesitant, painful. He didn't know what he wanted Jungkook to do. To leave, to break down the door, to finally say the things he'd been too proud to say for years. But all that came was silence. And then, footsteps retreating. Jimin's eyes shut tight, and he rolled to his side, pulling the covers over his head. The sheets smelled like lavender and guilt. He bit the inside of his cheek until it bled. Morning came cold and empty. The dorm kitchen was silent. Taehyung sat at the counter with a cup of black coffee, eyes shadowed, lips tight. Seokjin flipped through a news app on his phone without reading. Hoseok had his hoodie up, music blasting into his ears, pretending not to hear the hush that hung over the room like smoke after an explosion. Namjoon stood with his hands planted on the kitchen counter. He hadn't slept. That much was obvious from the deepening lines around his eyes and the stiffness in his shoulders. He looked up as Jimin entered, the younger's face composed but pale. They exchanged a brief glance, no words, just acknowledgement. Jungkook was not there. No one asked where he was. The TV was on, sound muted, showing a local entertainment news broadcast. Jimin's own face flashed across the screen, caught mid-sentence from the fan meeting. The headline beneath it was brutal in its simplicity. Jimin publicly rejects Jungkook. Is this the end of BTS unity? Jimin looked away. Taehyung set his cup down slowly and stood, crossing the room without a word. As he passed Jimin, he paused just briefly. "Fix this," he said flatly before walking out of the kitchen. Jimin didn't flinch. "It's not broken," he whispered under his breath. "It's already over." "Jimin," Namjoon's voice pulled him back. "We need to talk, before the label spins this worse than it already is." "Let them," Jimin replied, his tone strangely calm. "I'm not doing damage control this time." Hoseok pulled out one earbud. "Then what are you doing?" Jimin looked at them, his brothers, and for the first time there was no trace of the bright, bubbly persona that fans knew as Mochi. This was Park Jimin. Raw, stripped, hardened. "I'm telling the truth." Seokjin sighed, tossing his phone onto the couch. "And what truth is that?" Jimin met his gaze. "That I've been lying for years. About our friendship. About what really happened." Namjoon leaned forward. "You know this isn't just about you two anymore. This is affecting all of us." "I know," Jimin said softly. "But I can't keep protecting him." The room tensed. "Protecting him from what?" Hoseok asked. There was a pause, heavy and thick with unspoken memories. Jimin opened his mouth to answer, but just then, the front door clicked open. Jungkook stepped in. He was wearing the same clothes from the night before. His eyes were red-rimmed, and a thin line of dried blood marked the corner of his lip. He'd bit it too hard, probably in his sleep, if he even got any. He didn't look like the world's golden boy anymore. He looked like a ghost. Everyone fell silent. Again. Jungkook looked at each of them in turn before his eyes settled on Jimin. He didn't blink. Neither did Jimin. Namjoon exhaled. "We're having a meeting." "Good," Jungkook said, voice low and raw. "Because I've got something to say." No one spoke. Jungkook stepped fully into the room, and Jimin straightened his spine without realizing it. Jungkook looked at him like he was watching a stranger wear the skin of someone he used to love. "You want the truth?" Jungkook asked. "Fine, let's tell it." Jimin didn't break eye contact. "Then say it." Jungkook's jaw clenched. "You want me to admit it? That I lied to you? That I took you for granted? That I slept with her?" Gasps. Even the birds outside the dorm window seemed to fall silent. Namjoon's eyes widened. Hoseok's head snapped around. Seokjin stood up slowly. Taehyung, who had only just returned to the doorway, stopped in his tracks. Jimin's face remained stone. "You already did," Jimin said quietly. "No," Jungkook snapped. "I didn't. I let you walk around thinking it was a rumor, that it wasn't real. I should have told you. I should have told everyone. But I was scared." "Scared of losing me?" Jimin asked, voice soft but cutting. "Or scared of what people would think if they knew the golden maknae wasn't so golden after all?" Jungkook flinched. "I made a mistake," he said. "One, you made it everything." "No," Jimin said. "You made it everything. When you looked me in the eyes the next day and lied. When you held my hand and told me I was paranoid. When you gaslit me for months until I didn't know what was real anymore." Silence fell again. Thicker than before. Choking. Namjoon stepped forward. "Stop." Neither moved. "I said stop," Namjoon barked, his voice thunderous. It echoed through the walls and silenced them both. But the damage was already done. Everyone now knew. Jungkook had betrayed Jimin in the most personal way possible. And Jimin had finally, publicly, let the cracks show. Seokjin sat down slowly. "I don't even know what to say." Taehyung's voice was low. "You knew she was his first love. You knew what she meant to him." Jungkook shook his head. "I didn't mean for it to happen." "Then why didn't you stop it?" Jimin interrupted. Jungkook's mouth opened, closed. No answer. The weight of the truth sat in the middle of the room like a corpse no one wanted to look at. "I trusted you," Jimin whispered. "With everything." Jungkook finally looked away. "I know." "No," Jimin said. "You don't." He stepped forward, slowly, carefully, like walking through glass. "You don't know what it feels like to love someone so deeply you'd destroy yourself to protect them. You don't know what it feels like to see that same person look at you like you're disposable." Jungkook's throat moved as he swallowed. "I hated myself for months," Jimin continued. "I thought I was the problem. I thought I wasn't enough. And the worst part? You let me think that. You let me rot in that silence." Jungkook looked at him again, tears forming now. "I didn't know how to fix it." Jimin's voice broke. "You weren't supposed to fix it. You were supposed to never break it in the first place." The room felt smaller, as if every breath was being rationed. Finally, Jimin stepped back. "You said your piece. Now let me say mine." Jungkook nodded slowly. "I don't hate you," Jimin said, "but I don't love you anymore. And I'm done pretending." He turned, walked to his room, and shut the door behind him. This time, there was no one standing outside. No knock, no hesitation. Only the sound of something finally ending. The silence that screamed louder than words. Jimin's door remained closed for hours. No one dared to knock again. Outside the dorm, Seoul continued as usual. Cars moved, pedestrians walked past, and the sun crawled its way across the gray August sky. But inside, time felt warped. Words echoed long after they were spoken. The air inside the living room felt heavier than it should have, like it remembered the weight of truth too well. Jungkook sat alone at the dining table, hands clenched together tightly, his thumbs twitching, pressing invisible grooves into his skin. The tension in his shoulders was permanent now. The memory of Jimin's voice, his calm yet thunderous declarations replayed in a loop inside his skull like a curse. "You're nothing to me anymore." That sentence had rooted itself in his bones. It was no longer just a line from a bad moment. It was a verdict. It had torn open something raw. Namjoon paced silently near the window, phone in hand, not texting anyone, just holding it like an anchor. His face had settled into something unreadable, but the flicker of concern beneath his brow betrayed him. This wasn't just drama. This was fracture, and not the kind that could be patched with a joint statement or a press release. "I don't think this is salvageable," Hoseok muttered from the couch, pulling his knees to his chest. "We're not talking about the group," Namjoon said firmly. "But we are," Hoseok snapped, sitting up. "We always are." Seokjin stood near the kitchen sink. washing a mug without really washing it. The sponge just moved in slow circles. His voice was quiet. They were each other's core. If that collapses, I don't know what happens next. In the hallway, behind the closed door, Jimin sat on the floor with his back against the wall, knees bent, a hoodie pulled over his head. His phone sat face down beside him, buzzing periodically with calls from their manager, texts from label reps, even Taehyung. He didn't look at any of them. The ache behind his eyes had nothing to do with fatigue. It was deeper. He hadn't cried not yet, but the feeling lingered behind his ribs like a rising tide waiting to explode. He wasn't ready to break. Not when he had just started to rebuild himself without Jungkook at the center of his identity. But the memories didn't care about timing. He remembered their first night in the trainee dorm. Jungkook, barely 15, curled on his mattress, too shy to speak. Jimin had been the one to reach out, to laugh first, to joke. He remembered the first time Jungkook had cried, when he felt overwhelmed by the choreography. He remembered holding him, whispering, "You're not alone." And now, that same boy had become a stranger. A stranger with beautiful eyes, hands that trembled when they lied, and a mouth that had kissed someone Jimin trusted. Someone who once told him she loved his smile. He pressed his forehead against the wall and let out a shaking breath. Outside the room, the conversation was escalating. "I'm not saying we break up the group," Hosik said again, his voice tight with frustration. "But if they're going to keep showing up to events like this, fighting, not talking, making fans uncomfortable, what are we even doing?" "They're not children," Namjoon replied. "They'll figure it out. They're human," Taehyung added, stepping back into the room. "That's the problem." Jungkook's head snapped up. Taehyung looked directly at him. No hate, no pity, just sadness. "I covered for you," he said. Jungkook's eyes narrowed. "What?" "That night," Taehyung continued, "you were drunk. I saw you leave with her. I didn't say anything because I thought it was just a moment, a mistake. I thought you'd come to your senses and tell him." Jungkook stood up. "I tried." "You didn't try hard enough," Taehyung cut him off. "You let the silence do your dirty work." Jungkook's chest tightened. "Don't stand there like you're above it." "I'm not," Taehyung admitted. "But I didn't destroy someone who loved me like family." The words landed like a slap. "I didn't know she was going to tell him," Jungkook said, jaw clenched. "She said it would stay between us." "And that makes it better?" Suchin's voice was sharp. "You were willing to let him live in ignorance?" "I was protecting him," Jungkook muttered. "Bullshit," Namjoon finally said, his voice low but laced with fury. "You were protecting yourself." The silence that followed was the kind that came after an earthquake, everything unstable, everything liable to collapse again at the slightest shake. Jungkook lowered himself back into the chair. "You all hate me now." "No," Seokjin said, "but we don't recognize you." "Then maybe I don't recognize myself either," Jungkook whispered, almost too soft for anyone to hear. That night, Jimin finally emerged. Not during dinner, not when the rest of the boys were in the living room, watching fan edits with hollow laughs, but at 3:17 a.m., when the dorm was dark and the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the quiet whir of Taehyung's laptop still open on the counter. Jimin walked into the kitchen barefoot, in sweats and a black tee that hung loose around his collarbones. He looked fragile, but not broken, just empty. A storm that had passed. Jungkook was sitting at the kitchen table. Again, he didn't look up when Jimin entered. He just stared at his own hands, like they had betrayed him, too. Jimin poured himself a glass of water. The silence was long. Waited. And then, why her? Jungkook's head lifted. Jimin didn't look at him, just stared at the water swirling in the glass. There were hundreds of girls. Thousands. All of them would have fallen over themselves to be with you. Why did it have to be her? Jungkook's voice cracked. "I don't know." "Lie again," Jimin said coldly. "And I will walk out of this dorm and never come back." Jungkook closed his eyes. "Because she made me feel separate from you." Jimin finally looked at him. "What the hell does that mean?" Jungkook stood, stepped closer. "Everywhere we went, people saw us as a unit. Jungkook, you were always the one they said brought me out of my shell. You were always the one people compared me to. I was always the kid next to the star." Jimin's breath caught. "I loved you," Jungkook whispered. "But sometimes, I needed to feel like I existed outside of you. She gave me that. She saw me without you. Jimin stared, disbelieving. So you destroyed me because you wanted to feel more real? Jungkook's voice cracked again. I didn't mean to destroy you. But you did. I know. A long silence. I miss you, Jungkook whispered. Jimin's eyes glistened, but the tears didn't fall. I miss who we were, Jungkook continued. Before all this. Before the expectations. Before the pressure. Before we forgot how to talk like we used to. Jimin set the glass down. We can never go back, he said. I'm not asking to go back. Then what are you asking for? Jungkook looked down. A chance to make things right. Jimin took a step forward, and for a moment, Jungkook looked hopeful. But then, you had that chance, Jimin said, voice shaking. Every night you saw me crying and said nothing. Every time you saw her name on my screen and didn't flinch. Every time you looked me in the eye and chose silence. He turned to leave. I loved you, Jungkook said one last time. Jimin paused, hand on the doorframe. I loved you too, he said, but love doesn't survive betrayal. It drowns in it. He walked out. Jungkook didn't follow. The dorm returned to silence. And so did their hearts. The next morning wasn't quiet. It wasn't numb. It wasn't reflective. It was war. Hybe's PR team arrived at the dorm before the sun even cracked through the Seoul skyline. 3 black cars, 6 suits. None of them smiling. One of them dropped a tablet onto the coffee table and hit play. The room filled with Jimin's voice. You're nothing to me anymore. Even in the sterile cold of a morning meeting, the words still cut like razors. The clip had gone viral. Overnight, it had been clipped, memed, translated, remixed into fan edits that burned through every major social media platform. TikTok had over 30 million views under the Jungkook break hashtag. Twitter was chaos, half the fandom defending Jimin's right to speak his truth, the other half begging for clarification. News anchors were speculating on the end of BTS as we know it. Journalists had already requested interviews. Even Korean morning news had a segment titled, Love, Betrayal, and a Band on the Brink. No one spoke as the video finished playing. One of the suits, tall, pale, steel-framed glasses, adjusted his tie and finally addressed the room. Is this a stunt? His tone wasn't curious. It was accusing. No, Namjoon answered without missing a beat. It's not a fucking stunt. The man didn't flinch. Then it's a problem. He turned toward Jimin. What exactly are we dealing with? Jimin didn't move. He sat back on the couch, arms crossed, one foot bouncing slightly. He didn't answer. Mr. Park, the man pushed. We have deals pending in the US, a stadium tour on hold, a documentary series mid-shoot, and a brand partnership that has explicitly stated they will drop us if there's unresolved conflict between members. Jimin blinked once. I'm not resolving anything just to keep a sponsorship. A murmur of alarm passed between the team. Jungkook didn't look up. He hadn't since the video started. We're not asking you to lie. Another voice cut in softer, female trying to bridge. But perhaps an apology? Clarify that your statement was taken out of context? It wasn't, Jimin said. And I'm not sorry. The silence was thick, the tension unbearable. Seokjin finally stood. Enough. He looked at the corporate team, his usual playful expression replaced by something cold and regal. You're not here to understand. You're here to manage. And I get it. It's your job. But don't sit here and ask us to cover shit in glitter. He pointed at Jungkook. That man made a mistake. Then at Jimin. And that man was the one bleeding for it. He looked back at them all. So don't come into our home and act like we owe you a bow. You want a statement? Fine, you'll get one. But you'll write it knowing the truth, or not at all. The team looked stunned, but they packed up. Deadline's 3 p.m. One of them muttered as they filed out. The door clicked shut. Taehyung let out a long, tired sigh. Well, that was fun. Namjoon turned toward Jimin and Jungkook, still on opposite sides of the room, like rival magnets repelling each other. Now what? Jimin stood. He walked to the window. His silhouette framed by the pale morning light bleeding through sheer curtains. They're not getting a script from me. Jungkook's voice, gravelly and raw, floated up. I'll do it. Everyone turned to look at him. He stood. Pale. Quiet. But there was something different. A flicker of resolve beneath the guilt. I'll tell the truth. I'll say it was my fault. That I hurt him. That he reacted the way anyone would if they'd been betrayed. Jimin turned. You think an apology will fix it? Jungkook met his eyes. No, I think it's the least I can do. Their gazes locked, two broken kingdoms staring across a battlefield of silence and memories. Later that afternoon, the dorm emptied out. Each member disappeared to different corners of the city, some for meetings, some just to breathe. But Jimin remained behind. He didn't want to be seen, didn't want to be online. He lay flat on the couch, arm across his eyes, his phone silent next to him. For the first time in years, he didn't know who he was supposed to be. The door creaked open an hour later. He didn't move. Footsteps approached. A pause. Then something was placed on the table. He lifted his arm. A USB. With a note taped to it. Jungkook's handwriting. Watch it, then destroy it. Jimin sat up. He stared at the object like it might explode. His hand trembled slightly as he picked it up. He went to his room, locked the door, inserted the USB into his laptop. The screen flickered to life. And there he was. Jungkook. Sitting alone. No lighting, no makeup. Just raw, real, terrified. He looked straight into the lens. And he began to talk. Not to ARMY. Not to the company. Not to the world. To Jimin. Young, he said softly. If you're watching this, it means I finally found the courage to give it to you. Jimin's throat tightened. I never knew how to say this out loud. Every time I looked at you, I felt like I was shrinking. Not because you made me feel small, because I didn't deserve the way you looked at me. The video trembled slightly. Jungkook's hand must have shaken while recording. You always saw the best in me, even when I didn't. You forgave things I wouldn't have. You loved me in a way I didn't think I deserved, and I broke that. He swallowed. I didn't sleep with her to hurt you. I didn't even know what I was doing. I was lonely. I was stupid. I was spiraling. And she was there. And I let it happen. Jimin's eyes blurred. She told me she'd never tell, that it was just between us. But I think she saw the guilt in me. And she knew it would haunt me. That's why she gave you that letter. Jimin blinked. That letter. The one he found, shoved into the sleeve of his hoodie 2 months ago. Folded neatly. No return name. Just truth. I know you don't believe in me anymore. I wouldn't either. But I wanted you to see this before everything ends. Before the media spins us into monsters. Before the fans choose sides. Before I become the villain I probably deserve to be. He smiled faintly. Brokenly. You were the best thing in my life. And the worst mistake I ever made was thinking you'd always be there, no matter what I did. The screen went black. Jimin sat there. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just sat and breathed and whispered to no one, "You still don't get it." He ejected the USB and snapped it in half. By the end of that same evening, all 7 members were summoned into a high-security floor of the Hive building. They were escorted through private elevators, phones confiscated at the entrance. No stylists, no assistants, no makeup, just them, a rectangular conference room, and the thunderclouds that had formed above their heads since the fan meeting incident detonated across the internet. The room was stark white. One massive rectangular table, a screen embedded into the wall, an LED clock ticking silently towards 7:00 p.m. Chairs lined both sides, but everyone knew where to sit. Years of instinct didn't vanish in a week, no matter how shattered the family had become. Jimin sat on the far left, arms crossed, lips pressed into a silent line of war. Jungkook, across from him. Silent, small movements wringing his fingers, avoiding his reflection in the glass. Namjoon took the center seat, flanked by Seokjin and Taehyung, both looking unreadable. Hoseok sat near Jungkook, eyes lowered to the table as if searching for a peace treaty in the polished surface. The CEO walked in, followed by the legal department, a translator, and a cold-faced media advisor no one had seen before. "We have a problem," the CEO began. His voice wasn't angry. It was cold, controlled, corporate. "The world believes the band is fracturing. We've already received multiple withdrawal notices from sponsors. The American tour has been flagged as high risk by our insurance team. Streaming revenue is dipping as fans take sides." He clicked a button. The screen came to life with charts, headlines, online comments. The words stung more than numbers ever could. Jimin deserves better. Jungkook is a traitor. This feels like when One Direction fell apart. Hybe needs to get control before it's too late. Army is not your therapist. Namjoon exhaled sharply, muttering something under his breath that only Taehyung caught. Damage control starts now, the CEO continued. We're doing a live interview, 48 hours from now. Pre-approved questions, minimal staff, full transparency, controlled environment. Jimin raised an eyebrow. Controlled? He repeated. So it's a lie. No, the advisor interjected. It's a strategy. We're not puppets. Jimin shot back. You are investments, the CEO corrected. And right now, your value is bleeding. Jungkook finally spoke. His voice didn't shake this time. I'll do it. Everyone turned. I'll take full responsibility, Jungkook continued. I'll say what I did. I'll apologize again. Live with him there if he wants, or without him. Jimin looked at him, a flash of disbelief passing through his eyes. You think sitting on a couch with a mic makes you brave? He said quietly. No, Jungkook replied. I think telling the truth when the world is watching does. Too late for that. The CEO raised a hand. We're doing the interview. Both of you. It's not optional. You want to keep BTS alive? You show up, you talk, you make them believe you're surviving. And if we're not, Jimin said, then you better act like you are. The room broke apart after that. They all left in silence. Except Jungkook. He waited outside the elevator. Jimin stood beside him, both of them staring straight ahead, the elevator mirror showing two strangers who used to be home to each other. I never wanted to lose you, Jungkook said, not looking at him. You didn't lose me, Jimin whispered. You erased me. The elevator opened. He walked in. Jungkook stayed behind. That night, Jimin stood under the shower until the water ran cold. He pressed his palms to the tile and let the silence consume him. In the mirror afterward, he couldn't even meet his own eyes. At 3:00 a.m., his phone buzzed. It was Taehyung. I need to show you something. Come to the rooftop. He dressed slowly, hoodie and slippers. The dorm was dark. Everyone asleep, or pretending to be. Taehyung was waiting with a phone in his hand. Screen already unlocked. No words. Jimin took it. It was a recording. Not video. Audio. He pressed play. It was her voice. The girl, whispering. I didn't think he'd actually do it. I told him you loved him, that he was too blind to see it. And he said, that's exactly why I need to do this. Jimin's breath caught. He said, I need to make him stop looking at me like that. I can't carry it anymore. The file ended. Jimin stared at the screen. I found it on her private story, Taehyung said. Buried in a dump post. Deleted after 10 minutes. But someone saved it. It ended up on a fan Discord. I traced it back. He wanted me to stop loving him, Jimin whispered. So he killed it himself. Taehyung nodded. Jimin looked up at the stars. I would have done anything for him. I know. Even now, I know. 48 hours later, the room was set. It looked like a therapy office on camera. 2 chairs, soft lighting, a moderator with a gentle smile. Cameras placed like eyes, just far enough to feign intimacy but close enough to catch every twitch. Jungkook sat first, pale, hair down, no product, no earrings. Jimin walked in second. Their knees were inches apart. The moderator opened gently. Thank you both for being here. Jimin's voice was first. I'm not here because I want to be. The room tensed. I'm here because the truth matters more than comfort. Jungkook exhaled slowly. Then let's tell it. And so they did. Everything. Jungkook's betrayal. The lie. The aftermath. The silence. Jimin's pain. The letter. The night he almost quit the group. The time he watched Jungkook hug her outside the hotel in Tokyo and said nothing. Because he couldn't believe what he was seeing. It was raw. It was ugly. It was beautiful. It broke records. And it broke hearts. When the feed cut and the cameras shut off, no one moved. Then, for the first time in weeks, Jimin looked at Jungkook. Not with love. Not with hate. With peace. Now, he said softly, we start from zero. Jungkook nodded. Even if I don't deserve it. You don't, Jimin replied. But maybe I do. And with that, they stood. Together, but separate. The world didn't know what to make of it, but it was real. And that was finally enough. The calm that followed the interview was a lie. For the first 24 hours, it felt as if the weight on everyone's chest had lifted, even if only slightly. Messages poured in from fans across the globe, some crying, some thanking them for their honesty, others devastated, confused, or still choosing sides. But above all else, the response was loud. It was human. It proved that what had been said between them mattered, that the story had touched something deeper than idol drama. Jimin didn't respond to any messages. He turned off his phone, closed his social apps, and buried himself in dance practice, spending hours at the studio alone, pushing his body past its limit until his shirt stuck to his spine and his knees buckled under him. Sweat replaced tears. Muscle replaced memory. Jungkook, meanwhile, remained inside the dorm. He barely left his room. Every few hours, the others heard the soft thud of something falling. Maybe a pillow. Maybe himself. No one asked. Hoseok knocked once and left a bowl of soup by the door. It went cold. Taehyung stood outside for 10 minutes one night, playing a song they both used to love. No reaction. Seokjin looked in briefly. Jungkook was curled up on the floor, his phone face down beside him. His eyes weren't closed. He wasn't sleeping. Namjoon was the only one who received a response. He sent a message. A simple one. You still owe yourself forgiveness, even if he won't give it to you. The reply came 4 hours later. What if I can't? Then you learn how to live without it. But that fragile balance, that temporary illusion of healing, shattered 2 days later. A video leaked. Not the interview. Not the USB. Something worse. A hotel hallway. Security footage. Black and white. Low resolution. Timestamped from 6 months ago. Jungkook. And her. The girl. The night of the Tokyo show. The very one Jimin had mentioned in the interview. The video spread like wildfire. Fans dissected every frame. Some defended. Others raged. The company scrambled to suppress it, issuing DMCA takedowns, legal threats, damage control. But it was too late. The truth was out there, not as a confession, but as evidence. And that changed everything. Army fractured further. Public response turned brutal. Threats, accusations. Headlines now screamed betrayal. Jungkook trended globally for the wrong reasons. But what none of them expected was the private reaction from inside the label. The board called an emergency meeting. This time, they didn't just ask. They ordered. Jungkook was to be suspended from all public activity pending internal investigation into code of conduct violations. Even though the relationship wasn't illegal. Even though the girl wasn't staff. Even though the footage had clearly been stolen. Optics mattered more than truth. And Jungkook broke. That night, he disappeared. He didn't answer messages. Didn't come home. Didn't post. Just vanished. Jimin was the first to notice. Despite everything, some part of him still kept track of Jungkook's rhythm when he usually woke. What music he played in the shower. How the bedroom light under his door looked after 2 a.m. But there was nothing now. And that silence was louder than the fan meeting had ever been. Taehyung called every bar he thought Jungkook might retreat to. Hoseok drove through 3 districts. Namjoon pinged the staff to locate his company tracker, but it had been shut off. 12 hours passed. Then 14. Then 18. When they found him, it was Jimin who walked through the alleyway behind an old noodle shop in Mappo. The neon signs cast flickering lights on the wet pavement. A trail of blood dotted the wall near the dumpster. Jungkook was slumped on the ground, back against the brick, knuckles raw and torn. He looked up when Jimin knelt. You came, he murmured, voice slurred. Shut up, Jimin said, pulling his phone to call emergency. No, Jungkook whispered, reaching for his hand. Just stay, idiot, Jimin muttered, tearing off his jacket and wrapping it around Jungkook's hands. You really wanted to destroy yourself that badly? Jungkook's smile was hollow. Didn't work. Jimin stared at him. You think bleeding out in an alley is going to undo the past? I just wanted it to stop, Jungkook said. The noise, the hate, the way people look at me now, even the way you breathe near me like I'm poison. Jimin didn't answer right away. He pulled him closer, held him. For the first time in weeks, don't ever disappear like that again, he said. No matter how much you think you deserve it. I don't deserve you, Jungkook whispered. You don't, Jimin replied. But you're still here. When they got back to the dorm, No one asked what had happened. They just stared at Jungkook's bandaged hands and his bloodshot eyes. They didn't push. They just let him sit. It was the quietest the house had ever been. Until 2 hours later, when Namjoon called an emergency meeting of their own. This time, no staff, just the 7 of them. They sat on the floor. No furniture, no titles, no stage names. And Namjoon asked one question. What do we do if this doesn't go away? The silence after that question was heavy. Then Seokjin said something no one expected. Maybe it's not supposed to. They looked at him. Maybe this is the price, he continued, of being real. Maybe this is what it means to not be idols, but humans. Hoseok wiped his face. The company won't let this go. We're not letting them dictate how we recover, Namjoon said. Jimin spoke softly. I don't forgive him, no one interrupted, but I don't want to watch him die trying to earn it. He turned to Jungkook. You want to prove you're sorry? Then live with it. Every day. Do better. Be better. Not for me. For yourself. Jungkook nodded. Taehyung looked between them. Then we rebuild. From nothing. Like we did the first time. Namjoon nodded. Jimin stood. And in that moment, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like ashes. Still warm. Still alive. Still waiting. The meeting room on the 16th floor of Hybe was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that didn't feel like silence, but suppression. Controlled. Pressurized. Artificial. A bomb waiting for ignition. No fan art on the walls. No photos of awards or platinum plaques. Just gray panels, a steel table, and 7 chairs, each spaced evenly, like a courtroom designed for war. The room smelled faintly of lavender cleaning spray, and something colder like ink and metal. Behind the one-way mirror, the board of directors was watching. Not listening, just watching. Jimin sat alone on one end of the table, a black hoodie pulled over his head, rings on his fingers, jaw tight with the weight of weeks that never seemed to end. His leg bounced slightly. Not nerves, controlled rage. He stared straight ahead, not blinking, not moving. Taehyung sat beside him, elbows on the table, hands clasped like he was holding in a scream. His jaw was locked, and the faint bruise along his collarbone from dance practice the day before had already turned the color of regret. Hoseok, Seokjin, and Namjoon sat opposite, in grim silence. Jungkook's chair remained empty. Until now. The door opened slowly, and the room inhaled. Jungkook stepped in, black cap, sleeves covering the healing scars on his knuckles, eyes darker than any of them had seen since debut. He moved like someone walking to their own funeral, but with no desire to avoid it. He sat beside Jimin. No one spoke. A voice crackled through the intercom from behind the mirror. Begin. Namjoon stood first. This is not an apology tour, he said, voice level. This is not a denial. This is not a PR maneuver. This is our demand. Either you listen to what we say and let us lead the solution, or we walk. There was silence on the other end. But the camera above the mirror rotated slightly. They were listening. Namjoon turned to Jungkook. Speak. Jungkook swallowed. I broke a promise I never said out loud, but one that mattered more than any contract I've ever signed. I hurt the person who made me who I am. I betrayed trust, not just Jimin's, but the group's, the company's, the fans. I made choices out of fear, selfishness, and weakness. Jimin didn't look at him. Jungkook's voice cracked. And if you think that suspending me, controlling the narrative, or burying it will make that mistake go away, then none of you ever understood who we were. The intercom buzzed. What do you propose? The voice asked. We propose transparency, Namjoon said. A docu-series, not the one you've been planning. A real one. Our story. No edits, no polishing. If the world's gonna tear us apart, they should know what they're tearing. Jimin's voice cut the room in half. And if they're going to forgive us, they should know what they're forgiving. Another buzz. You want to record your own destruction? No, Taehyung said. We want to record the truth. There was a long pause. Then a voice they hadn't heard in weeks came through. It was the founder. He wasn't supposed to speak directly, but he did. You want control? He said. Then you carry the weight. If this explodes, it's on you. Namjoon nodded. We accept that. The voice hesitated. Then, so be it. The light above the mirror turned off. The meeting was over, but not the war. That night, Jimin and Jungkook sat in the van together for the first time in weeks. No staff, no manager, just the driver up front and 5 feet of silence between them. Jimin leaned his head against the window, watching the Seoul skyline pass by in fractured blurs of neon and rain. "You've changed," Jungkook said quietly. Jimin didn't move. "Since that night. Since the fan meeting. It's like you shed something." "I did." "What?" "My illusion of you." Jungkook flinched, but nodded. "Good. You should have." The van pulled up outside their old practice studio, the one they hadn't visited in months, the place where their journey had started. When they walked in, the room was already set. Camera equipment, a single folding chair in the middle, a mic. The first episode of their self-produced documentary. Jimin sat down. The crew adjusted lighting, cables, background. It was strange how something so heavy could begin in such silence. When the red light blinked on, Jimin spoke without being asked. "You want to know who I was before BTS?" He looked up at the camera. "I was a kid who lied about how much pain he was in. Every day. I smiled because I thought that was the only currency people would accept from me. I starved myself, slept 3 hours a night, said yes when I wanted to scream." He blinked, and then I met him. The camera didn't move. I thought he was light. And maybe he was. But I built my entire emotional survival around that light. And when he left, I didn't know how to see in the dark. He inhaled. "So I'm learning." The light blinked off. Outside the studio, Taehyung lit a cigarette behind the alleyway. He didn't smoke often. Only when his mind was so loud it needed something to burn with it. He heard footsteps behind him. "I thought you quit," Jungkook said. Taehyung took a long drag before answering. "I did. But ghosts don't care about promises." "You still mad at me?" Taehyung looked at him, smoke curling past his lips. "I don't know what I am." There was a long silence. Then Jungkook said something he hadn't even realized he'd buried. "You remember when we were in Japan? That night you found me crying in the hotel hallway?" Taehyung nodded. "You thought it was because I missed home. It wasn't?" "No." He looked up. "I kissed you that night." Taehyung blinked. "I never told you. You were asleep. Or pretending. I don't know." Taehyung exhaled sharply, like the wind had been knocked out of him. "You." "I was terrified," Jungkook said. "Of everything. Of you. Of what it meant. I pushed it away. Buried it. That's why I went to her. I needed to prove something to myself. That I could control who I wanted." Taehyung dropped the cigarette. "You don't get to tell me that now." "I know. You don't get to rewrite the damage." "I'm not trying to." "What the hell are you trying to do then?" "Tell the truth." "Why?" "Because it's the only thing I have left." Taehyung stared at him. "I felt it," he said. "That night, I felt it. And I let you pretend it didn't happen, because I was afraid too." They stood in the alley, years of tension unraveling between raindrops. "Are we broken?" Jungkook asked. Taehyung didn't answer, just walked away. Back inside, Jimin was watching the footage, not just his own, everyone's. The producers had sent him raw clips. They were piecing together something real, ugly, beautiful. He clicked a file, Jungkook's confession. It wasn't part of the plan script. He was sitting alone in the corner of the dance studio. "I don't know if I'll ever be forgiven," he said to the lens. "But I know I'm still breathing. And if that's all I have, then maybe that's enough to start." Jimin stared at the screen, then closed the laptop. His heart wasn't healed, but it was awake. And that was enough. For now. The night the documentary dropped, the world changed. It wasn't a press event. There was no countdown, no glittering live stream, no PR campaign. At 9:46 p.m., without warning, a single tweet appeared on BTS's official account. "We owe you the truth. All of it." The link that followed led to a 58-minute video hosted on a private server, uploaded by the group's internal media team, bypassing HYBE's official platforms. Within 3 minutes, servers crashed. Within 10, ARMY had already backed up hundreds of mirror links. Within 20, Twitter turned into a digital volcano. By dawn, it had passed 35 million views. And it broke everything. Not because it was dramatic. Not because of the rumors. Not because of the betrayal. Because it was real. No editing, no music, no polished transitions, just vulnerability so naked it felt indecent. Jimin's face, stripped of makeup, sitting beneath fluorescent studio lights, voice trembling but unflinching as he admitted to feeling invisible for years. Jungkook's confession that he had not only failed the group, but had lied to himself for too long. Taehyung admitting that he knew, that he'd kept silent, that he was part of the rot. Seokjin crying quietly when he confessed he almost walked out of the group in 2019. Hoseok saying he had stopped believing in the dream the moment it started being sold. Namjoon near the end, staring into the camera and saying, "You've called us legends, gods, family, but we were boys. We were just boys." The video was a wound, and millions watched it open. It trended in every country on Earth. Some praised them for their bravery. Some turned on them completely. Sponsors withdrew. Talk shows mocked them. News anchors dissected their mental health with clinical detachment. One Western news outlet called it the collapse of the BTS mythos. HYBE held an emergency press conference that afternoon, not to support the group, to condemn the video. Without warning, without consent, without coordination, they called it reckless. Said it damaged the brand. Said the boys were emotionally compromised. They promised to handle the matter internally. That word handle felt like poison in Jimin's throat. He didn't wait. He didn't consult. He just walked into the company headquarters 3 hours later, flanked by Taehyung and Namjoon. No security, no legal team, no PR. Just fury. He stormed into the 18th floor, past reception, into the executive wing where 3 of the board members were already seated with 2 lawyers. None of them stood. None of them welcomed him. "You want to handle us?" Jimin said, voice calm but dangerous. "Then let's talk about what you've already buried." One of the executives, a tall man with gray temples and a smug smile, leaned back in his chair. "Park Jimin. You're not in a position to make threats." "I'm not threatening," Jimin said. "I'm revealing." He pulled out his phone, hit play. Audio spilled out.